Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. I'm your host, Steve Figueros of Tri-City Equity Group, where we talk all things cash flow and help you secure your financial future using real estate. Today, we have Stephanie Figueros on the show. Stephanie is a real estate investor and realtor that specializes in short-term rentals and long-distance real estate investing. She has a background as a registered nurse and has experience in rental arbitrage, owning joint venturing, and co-hosting in the short-term rental space. She invests with her partner, Robert, in their current markets are in California, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. They self-manage and have built an in-house team. She's also the co-founder of STR Nation, the CEO of her STR short-term rentals, property management, and co-hosting company, Vivid Iconic Properties, VIP. I like that. And she's also a coach and does consulting for short-term rentals as well for individual investors, both new or seasoned. She can definitely help you to level up your short-term rental game. All right, Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. No, glad that you are able to come on and spend a little bit of time, dive a little bit into your background and tell us a little bit about your experience. So for those of our listeners that may not be familiar with you or your property management company or any of that kind of stuff, fill us in. Give us a little bit of background. How did you get started in real estate? You went from being a nurse. Sounds like you got a lot of business going on. So fill us in on the background.
Sure. So I'm a former registered nurse. Technically, I am still licensed, but I don't practice. So I make a joke that I am an RN, but it stands for rusty nurse instead. And I left the hospital setting during the pandemic, actually, and intentionally went to go work from home as a nurse so that I could learn and have the time and energy to learn about real estate investing. So I remember one day I was sitting at my desk at the hospital and I'm like, there has to be something more than this. This cannot be what it's going to be for the next 30 years for myself. So I actually went through a bunch of side hustle ideas. I mean, that was the first thing, like, oh, a side hustle. And I thought about doing e-commerce, all this other virtual stuff. And then my partner actually was like, hey, you should watch these YouTube videos on real estate. So I already kind of had the idea like, all right, real estate's there. But I think at that time I was ready to actually receive this information of real estate, this gold. And once I watched those videos, I was like, all right, this is it. This is what we're going to do. And so like I have this master plan and I didn't tell anybody in the hospital. I'm like, I'm going to work from home still as a nurse somehow. I don't even know if those positions are there. And they landed that. And while doing that, I'm going to learn how to do real estate. And so I did what I thought was the logical thing to do, which was to get your real estate license. And I didn't do it for the sake of like being a residential realtor. I did it because I thought that was the logical thing to do, to invest in my own deals. And actually going from nursing into real estate, it was a really good prerequisite. Some people kind of poo-poo realtors and sometimes when it comes to investing because you're like, they don't have to have a license. And that's true. But for somebody coming from a non-real estate world, being exposed to the lingo, even the flow of the transaction made a big difference for me when we actually started making offers. So I personally thought that was great. And now I've kind of come full circle to where I actually went to a real estate meetup, got talked out of doing short-term rentals, even though I was like, I really want to do this. It fits the lifestyle I want about traveling and stuff. And I was going to do wholesaling, mobile home flipping. And then I had an opportunity to actually do an arbitrage with some family. And I didn't run numbers. I didn't do any of that. I simply saw an opportunity and said, if this is what it takes to get started, just to get in, I'll do it. And so I did that while still working as a nurse and eventually scaled to 4 properties in 9 months while working as a nurse. And I was able to quit with that 4th property. And then I had some other projects in the pipeline. So, and that pretty much blossomed into what I do today, which is I ended up co-hosting, or I do co-hosting now. That wasn't intentional, but now I have an STR property management business. I'm an STR realtor. It just made sense because of what I do. And then I got into a lot of coaching and consulting for those that are trying to get started. Founded STR Nation a little bit more earlier in my journey. And yeah, we keep going up and up. So
No, that's awesome. And obviously a lot to unpack there. And that's probably years of experience and a journey into a brief kind of synopsis. But that's awesome. No, there's a couple of things there that I want to cover. So for one, like you mentioned, you left during COVID, right? So this is one of the things that's like super powerful about real estate. It gives you options. You didn't have to depend on, I mean, really what is anywhere, typically a well-paid job. Like most people do not want to leave like a nursing job. My wife did the same thing. We were talking a little bit off camera and people were really surprised when she left because that's like, here in Hawaii, like that's a great job, great paying job. And it's like, what do you mean you're leaving? Right? Like, why? And like, they just can't compute. So, I love that about real estate that it gives you options. And then two, like you obviously explored a number of different avenues to try and see what best fit for you might be. This is kind of like a dual-edged sword, right? I talk to people about real estate all the time and it's like, there's a million and one different ways to make money in real estate. And that's a dual-edged sword. Because on one hand, you're bound to find a good fit for what your personality, skill set, and all that kind of stuff is. The hard part of that though is you're likely going to have to try a number of different avenues to find the best fit for you, right? Not everybody's cut out to be an agent, right? Or a wholesaler or, a short-term rental operator, right? Because every one of them kind of require a different skill set, but kudos to you for finding some stuff that works. So now you're an agent for investors. So helping other people get into the business of short-term rental. And do you kind of pair, like, is that how you kind of position it? So like, well, I'm a one-stop shop for you. I could help you to buy the property for sure. I'll help you analyze it, underwrite it, all that kind of stuff. Obviously I can help you to buy it. So I'll facilitate the transaction. And then after the fact, hey, I can either co-host it for you or just outright manage it for you if you need that. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, great point there. I've literally given 4 offers, actually 5, to one investor. And I've done this multiple times where it's like, well, tell me what it is that you're actually trying to do with this property. And I've literally said, okay, here's what I can do. I can buy it from you. I can rent it from you. I can manage it for you. I can sell it for you, or I can teach you how to do this better. Because most of the times by the time I get certain leads within STRs, it's because they're struggling in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. So having those different 5 options in one, and then if they're looking elsewhere, I'm part of Savvy Realty. It literally is an STR brokerage, which I think is really awesome. It's like, I can help you find and refer you to somebody in a different state if you don't want to be here. So, and I'd be using those agents myself for my own deals. So there's a lot of options, and it's kind of funny because I didn't plan it that way at all. It just kind of turned into that. And so I pretty much have this tool belt now, all backbone by STRs, but it's like, I can solve whatever problem that you have. And if I can't do it, I have the network to be able to do it to help you. So it's been pretty cool.
No, I love that. And actually, I love that you use that tool belt analogy, right? I use that quite a bit as well. Like you come across clients, whether they're in buyers, right? Investors, homeowners, buyers and sellers, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And the more problems that you can solve, obviously the more value you can bring, right? So you can walk into a situation, especially like dealing with an investor, and say, hey, look, you don't have to go anywhere else. Like I'm your solution, right? Like I can help you buy, I can help you sell, we can help manage, underwrite, all that kind of stuff. If you're going to go out of state, totally, I got you too. Like I am the one-stop shop. You don't need to look anymore. And because you can bring so much value to the table, then obviously puts you in a position where, hey, look, if they're shopping agents or they're trying to go somewhere else, it's like, well, look, man, Stephanie delivers a ton of value. I kind of don't need to go anywhere else, right? And I feel like I've been an agent before too, right? So most agents don't understand kind of the investing side of the business. They're used to just working retail transactions and, hey, you know what? You're looking for a house for yourself. Cool. I can help you. Too oftentimes I've seen, it's like, well, that's the only tool they know what they have in their belt. And so like, there's limited amount of value that they can bring. So you, by going out, taking action, failing forward, like you said, it was like, well, that wasn't my initial intention, but because I'm an investor myself, yeah, I can help you. Right. So that's awesome. I love that part of your journey.
There's lots of opportunities. You just have to make the opportunities happen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how did you do obviously, like I know in your bio, you partnered for a number of different things. Is that something was that kind of an organic thing where it's like, hey, well, I need property management for my own stuff. Is this something where it's like, well, it's vertically integrated, or was that something you reached out and were like, hey, well, it's just a new venture kind of deal? Like, how did that come about?
Honestly, that was not intentional either at first. It was more kind of like lead by example, like, hey, I'm doing this And then next thing you know, well, I want to do what you're doing, but I don't want to do what you're doing. I want to be I want to be in it, but I don't want to do it. And so a lot of these partnerships that I've kind of come across turn into, well, you know how to do it. I have the means to currently do it. How do we work together in some way, shape, or form? And so that's pretty much how it's been. I've come to find, like for me with short-term rentals, like I want to be like the best. I want to become the expert. It only makes sense. And I think this is kind of how in the nursing world, you have a specialty and you really lean into that specialty and you become really, really good at it, whether it's like cardiac, whether it's surgery. For me, I did case management. So I just learned really well how to put out fires and get people to where they need to be. And so I guess for me, when I came into, when I started real estate, I have a whole shiny object syndrome thing. And then really leaning into STRs, I just decided to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to go all in. I'm going to get really good at this. And the people will notice that. And that's kind of how these partnerships started and how I've kind of blossomed into.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, and like I said, there's got to be a number of skills that translate too, and especially if you're doing case management, then yeah, you are. It's a good fit for handling all of the stuff that comes up, managing short-term rentals, because it's like at the end of the day, it's a people business. It's a hospitality business, right? Like I've heard that many times where it's like there's a dichotomy where you almost have to separate out, like, hey, look, specifically for short-term rentals, there's the real estate aspect of it. But then the second side of that coin is, well, it's a hospitality business as well. So you can win on both, but you have to learn how to manage both. And sometimes that's a challenge. I mean, you have guests, you have issues that come up, and sometimes you just like pulling your hair out. So I'm no doubt, I'm sure your experience in the hospital and high stress situations and dealing with upset people, no doubt has come in handy over your career to this point, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And it's funny. It's like the way I describe it is people come at the hospital at like a -5. They're just unhappy. They're in the worst position of their life from their standpoint. And by the time they leave, I'm trying to get them to at least like a 7. Usually they are, but for guests when they come in, they're usually already up there at like an 8. You just got to keep them over on that higher side and not get them any lower. So it's much easier dealing with guests and the patients. But to be honest, the way I interact is the same. Patients are just like guests and guests are just like patients. It's the funniest thing to me, quite frankly. Clients are the same way. I can't quite even, like I even interchange some terms with my virtual assistants. I'm like, check the census, which is a nursing term that goes on in the houses or in the rooms. And so that's like, I've definitely brought the nursing side. Discharge and admissions turn into check in, check out. And it's kind of how it's translated super well. And I had no idea that would really be the case when I first started in real estate. I was actually, super scared to go. I'm not qualified for it, but I realized that that's a myth. You don't have to know everything when you first start.
No, I love that. I love that. And it's like that embodies, do it scared, right? Like you don't have to have all the answers, but you're not going to. And the fastest way you'll learn on is by getting in there, getting dirty, so to speak, right? Like actually doing the thing. Like when you started nursing, hey, you don't have all the answers. You're going to go to nursing school, sure. And they're going to teach you all this stuff and anatomy and physiology and all of that. It's like, yeah, but then that's the mechanical part of it. But then you're also dealing with the patients directly and they have personalities and so it's like all of that is on the job training, so to speak, right? So it's the same thing with investing. You're not going to know how to solve that problem until you're actually in the midst of it and getting in there. So that's great. Yeah. Just doing it scared. So that's awesome. Well, kind of one thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is like, obviously you're doing coaching, you're still helping people buy and all that kind of good stuff. And you're managing your own portfolio. How do you see, I keep seeing videos where, are being bust and, oh, the sky is falling, Chicken Little, all this kind of stuff, right? How do you see kind of the current market? And obviously we've had a big shift. If you're operating since COVID, let's say, there's been a big shift this last 18 months from the last couple of years, let's say. How has that impacted your business? What kind of transitions have you made? How has that impacted the way that you're operating?
Sure. So the good news for us when we first started short-term rentals in general, we went in the intention of this is going to be a business and we're going to make it sustainable. So this wasn't a hobby. It started as a side hustle in the sense of that it wasn't my full time, but I wanted to make it my full time. So, and I wanted to change like literally like my life and my family's life. So we really set ourselves up right from the beginning. So when it came to competing with other people, we designed our houses. We made sure that they stood out better than everybody else's from the beginning. And we're kind of shifting more though towards really marketing, learning how to market it better. I'm not a marketer by trade either. So I've been doing a lot of learning and also leaning on the expertise of other people that know marketing to learn how to put these Airbnbs in front of guests that need to book. So I kind of think what's happening is with the Airbnb buzz, there are a couple of things. Those that are actually doing this as a hobby instead of a business are getting funneled out. And those are the houses that you're seeing on the market, because those that are really thriving, they set themselves up from the very get-go to thrive. And not only that, they're only getting better. And so I'm a life learner. So I love learning new things. And marketing is one of those things where I was just like, oh, is it really that important? And as a consumer, you don't think about that. But now that on the business side of things, marketing is more important than sales, quite frankly. And it's really cool to be able to see this new way of like going about life. And I think even still it blows my mind. I'm like, wow, I'm really meant for this stuff. Why didn't I figure this out when I was still like in college? I could have just didn't go nursing. I could just went straight to business. But I actually think that I'm way better off now because of that nursing experience, because with marketing, it's psychology. Even sales is psychology. Dealing with patients and the hospital setting, it literally, the mind is everything. And so realize the position now is you have to understand behaviors of people and why they book, what they look for, ask for feedback, those type of things. So we're really leaning into being better with marketing and not just putting stuff on Airbnb and crossing our fingers. But on top of that, we're always looking for ways to stand out. So I'm actually going to be going to my properties to visit them for the next couple of months. And so I'm thinking constantly, okay, what else can I do to improve this listing to stay on top?
Right. And I love that you said that too, right? Like to make it a business, not a hobby, because that approach is huge. It kind of hurts me when I hear people, specifically talking about short-term rentals, like we also invest in commercial assets. And I guess that headspace and that mindset of most of the investors there is like, no, it's a business. Like there's, not that they don't have any fun doing it, but that's never the intention. And I think for a lot of people that kind of start off with short-term rentals, it's like you, right? It's like, well, hey, now you have the right mindset going into it, but there's something inherently fun about, well, hey, I'm going on a vacation, right? Or it's a short-term rental, right? Like, so you can make it fun. But it irks me when I hear people talking about, oh, it's get in the short-term rental game. Like it just bugs me. And it's like, because if that's the way you're looking at it from the get-go, like I get that may be a way for you to kind of make it not so daunting, but run it like a business versus treating it like a game, right? Like if you say it's a game from the get-go, then you're going to take it less seriously. And that's just been one of those things that's bothered me. No, so that's great. And I'm sure like that tunes your whole mindset of like, nope, we're going to make it work. We got to have operations lean. How can we improve on, efficiencies here? How can we make this a profitable business versus, well, it's a lifestyle asset and cool if it does well, if it makes money. And for some people, that's a good fit, but it doesn't sound like that's your approach. So that's great. And then too, like I know you guys started the STR Nation. Does that kind of dovetail into like the whole marketing piece? Like how does that, or it was just like kind of, hey, we're trying to provide value and that kind of deal. Like what was the impetus for that?
Sure. So one thing that I found, especially having a property far away, was I wanted to have neighbors, whether they were virtual neighbors or in person. Putting the meetup together, I wasn't one of the people that put the first one together, but I was one of the people that brought it to the next level and made it to what it is today. But we didn't really go into STR Nation or create it with the mindset of like promoting our specific rentals. It was really more for the community aspect of it, just because like for me being in so many markets, it's really cool to actually know that I have found almost all of my neighbors either virtually or somehow in person in the markets themselves. And I can stay in touch with them and we can exchange and go back and forth. But what we're coming to find now is that it's kind of taking a life of its own. It's becoming a platform, especially for newer investors trying to learn short-term rentals and to learn it the right way and in a supportive environment, because it can be very lonely. And if you're not in the right community, I think a lot of people start to kind of go along the wayside. And it's those that are being successful or those that keep pulling the people with them to go up. So high tide raises all ships. It just made sense to get a really solid community Because if I ever need anything either, I go straight to STR Nation and say, hey, who knows this? And people are willing to help because we keep providing a lot of value in connecting people together. So, and it's, to me, it's always evolving. So there's no like set trajectory other than we're just going to keep growing bigger and keep going up together. But it's really cool. It's really cool to see the different people that we've connected, and now they're business partners, they're accountability partners. And before that, they were by themselves. So that's what we're finding with STR Nation.
Yeah, it's you guys. You created a tribe, right? Like these are the people that can count on each other, can connect with each other. And you're right. Like it is kind of lonely. And like how many? I'm sure if you were to go into the hospital, back to the hospital, hey, how many of you guys invest in real estate? And it's like not unless you're like actively approaching them, right? Like, but most of them aren't, right? And this is, I mean, most people in general, I think if they have like a W-2 and like a traditional job like that, you're in healthcare or you're in business, they're just going to work their W-2. And it's like, well, I got a pension or I got retirement, I got my 401k or whatever, and I'm just going to work towards retirement. I'll be here the next 30 years or whatever it takes. And it's just like, most of them don't even know that there's another option out there, especially like that as a nurse, right? Like that's a great job. Like most people aren't thinking about leaving that or even augmenting their income or doing something different than that. So yeah, when you create that group, for one, the people need it to be able to connect with each other, but it's also another lifeline for other people. I say, hey, why don't you come to a meetup? It's just people wanting to get together and learn more about how to better themselves, better their business, and see what kind of options are out there. Like, I think that's great. And you guys have a conference coming up too, I know, right?
Yes, in San Diego, September 25 and 26 are our main events at the Lane. This is our second one. We are super excited, Patrick and I, because we've put a lot of effort and work into it. And last year's was this huge success. So we're happy to bring it to California because last year we had it in Vegas. So it's going to be a really good conference. Last year's was really good. And I learned a ton even just putting it together myself, because we're bringing in short-term rental specific experts from all over the country. And whoever gets to be in that room is going to literally leave and be like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing? Change it all. Everyone's going to get better, which is actually a good thing for short-term rental operators. We don't want this to be a race, a race to the floor or race to the ground, as they call it. We want everybody to go up so that it's all good for our businesses. So
yeah, I've seen the speaker lineup for you guys, and that's awesome. I mean, you guys have some really, really big names in the short-term rental industry coming to be present, to be speaking at the conference. So awesome. Well, what kind of turnout are you guys shooting for this time? And what was that compared to the first conference? Was what kind of turnout did you guys have?
Last year we had about 150 to 170, and it was actually nice that way too. A lot of the attendees loved the more intimate aspect, but this year the menu capacity is between 250 to 300. So we inched it up a little bit, but yeah, it'll still be cozy, but it won't be too big to where everyone feels kind of stifled after.
No, that's awesome. And so like that, if you ask yourself pre-COVID, like, hey, Stephanie, you're going to be running short-term rentals. You're going to have a property management company. You're going to be throwing a conference. You're going to be doing all this stuff. Is that something that you ever would have thought?
I love pitching it because, and this is the gratitude part. Like I still pinch myself because when I still see some of my old coworkers from the hospital setting, and nothing to say anything bad, but just kind of like, I would have never thought that I'd be over here, not working in the hospital. And I have to say, there's a lot of sense of pride that comes with it, because you make a lot of sacrifices when you decide to leave a profession that, with everything you once knew, you have to change as a person, not just your position that you once were. And so it's cool to see where I once was to where I am now. And then it does inspire my old coworkers too, to think, hey, think a little bit bigger than just these walls.
Right. Yeah. No, like I said, even your success provides them a lifeline, right? It's like, hey, well, I knew you, we were working the floor together or whatever. Right. And it's like, wait, you're doing what now? Like you're putting on a conference and you're investing all over the country. You're traveling. You're going to go visit your property. Wait, you have more than one house? It's like stuff that's not normal, I guess, for like a lot of people, but because they see you doing it, like, hey, you know what? Now it's a potential. Like, hey, what, you want to learn more? Like, sure, I'm glad to share with you, right? Like you can share in the success. Like you mentioned, like, hey, I want to bring other people up, right? Like come check out the conference, right? Like you can learn more. No, so that's awesome. That's awesome. Now I know you said you guys are in multiple states. What current markets are you in, and are you planning to expand to different markets? Are you going to look to just kind of hammer the existing ones that you're in, or what do you have currently and what's on the horizon?
Sure. So right now, California, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida are our main markets. Right now, we're actually trying to take it back to California. I had a project here. It was we were going to bird into an STR and it ended up turning into a fix and flip instead. So I'm looking for something again in my backyard, just because what I find going to different markets is the seasonality is there. And so my way of diversifying my short-term rentals is buying them in different markets, in different areas. Because when it's frozen pipes in Tennessee, I don't really have to worry about. At least my Florida property is fine. There's no winterizing pipes there. My California property, when I had after I was before, it actually offset the seasonality in other markets because it's a lot less seasonal here. So I'm in the mountains, the beaches, and I'm kind of so Kissimmee, Florida is where my Florida property is. So I consider that kind of like, it's a hybrid. It is vacation specific, but I do get like people that come for conferences, come for just events. So things that I could see people come in California for. So I'm wanting to actually double down in my backyard here because I do think that I've had properties that I've both had myself and ran and managed for other people. And so I think there's just a lot of untapped markets out here that people just don't realize. They're secondary markets. But the friends that I know that do invest here, whether it's STR and MTR, they do really well. And so I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to keep diversifying my portfolio by putting a little bit more on the metro city side of things. But I can still pivot into MTRs, which is much different than what my original portfolio or my current portfolio looks like. So that's what's currently on the horizon. I do want to balance it out a little bit. I don't want to do long-term rentals. So I'm kind of going for the STR MTR hybrid. I'm happy with that.
And yeah, for those of our listeners that may not be, because our show is not specifically short-term rental focused, like what's an MTR for those of our listeners that may not be aware of what's an MTR?
Oh, sure. So midterm rental is what an MTR is. It's 30-day stays, essentially, not less, can be 3 months. Nursing contracts are probably the most common traveling nurses when they visit a hospital for 13 weeks. So that's kind of like your target person for a midterm rental. That's what that means.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we do midterms here in Hawaii for different reasons, but it's a great diversification against some strategy to help deal or help offset some of that. You mentioned the seasonality, because I know some people will do that where they'll have a hybrid short-term rental midterm. Like, hey, you've got, if your summer market is the boom time, awesome. Like take full advantage of that. And then if the winter time is the slow season, hey, try to see if you can get a midterm in there, a snowbird or something like that, just so you have some coverage. You're not dealing with total vacancy because the market doesn't do well during that time. So, and sometimes some markets, hey, you know what? It's midterms all the way. And that's what it calls for. You close to a hospital or a military town or whatever. So, there's definitely a time and a place and a good fit for different markets for that specific style of investing. So no, that's great. It's good that you have wrote down here. I think it's super important. I feel like in traditional stocks and equities, a lot of people talk about portfolio diversification, right? Stocks, bonds, kind of typically what they think about. But I've always been a huge proponent of geographic diversity within your portfolio, right? Because just like how you mentioned, hey, my beach stuff offsets my mountain stuff. Like they both have seasonality, but hey, when the beach time is cranking, great. Like that helps to carry my stuff that's doing well in the opposite season. So it's a great way to help balance out your portfolio. People don't like having the roller coaster of occupancy. That's a great way to do it. Plus too, I mean, we saw during COVID, there's a lot of different areas that got kind of wiped out, or you had a lot of net outflow of migration patterns, right? So you have some areas that are doing well because they have increased business and all that kind of stuff. And you have other ones that are kind of declining. So if you're diversified within your own portfolio, that's a great opportunity to be able to help sustain yourself during lean times, or gives you an option to help kind of pivot if you need to. But yeah, I'm a huge proponent of that. So that's great. And kind of throughout all of this too, you've definitely had this growth mindset. I can tell. Was that something that you had to really focus on before you kind of made the journey into short-term rentals, like working additionally on mindset? Or was it like, no, this is going to work. I'm just going to make it work and see it through. Like how important has mindset been to you throughout kind of all of this?
I love that you mentioned this question because as of current for today, it's huge. It's actually everything to me. But when I first started, I wasn't really worried about like the mindset of it. It was more just kind of like, how am I going to do this? Like, how will I make this work? How will I make it happen? And what ended up happening was as I started doing it, then I realized, oh my gosh, now all these mindset things that people just wouldn't have thought about in the first place comes through, this doubt, what ifs, all that. That happened like later, like as I was doing it. And I think it was because I started seeing, I was getting uncomfortable. And it was when I started getting uncomfortable, was when I started to really realize, like, I got to get my mind right and whatever it takes. And if I'm really going to somehow make the switch, leave nursing altogether, I can't be thinking the same way I was as a nurse. I need to start getting, it's like I had to convince myself and not listen to any noise of what I was doing. And so I've kept that with me. And now I have to have it even more because even though I don't do nursing anymore, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. You really have to be on top of yourself and essentially boss yourself around. And there's days you don't want to do something, but you have to do it. No one's going to tell you. And when you start having people that are relying on you directly, now it's like, okay, I really have to step up and make sure that you are whole. So mindset now is everything. Like whenever I read books, it's mindset books that I read. It's less technical because you can learn this stuff as you do it. It's the mindset books that keep you going.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I've experienced that firsthand too. And you're right. Like your mindset has to shift, especially from, let's say somebody like you is leaving a W-2, going into being in the entrepreneur space. Now you're the one that's providing the jobs, right? Like there's no more clock in, clock out. Now you have other people that are depending on you to kind of make things happen. So it's a totally different mindset. So yeah, that's actually really, really good. Well, at this point in the show, we transition to what we call our fire round. That's something you're game for?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First question, what is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I really like Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David.
PBD.
I don't know if you've read it or heard of it, but I like that book a lot.
Love PBD. He's awesome. All right. And then next question, what would you consider your superpower?
I'm really good at anticipating things. I'm also really good when it comes to putting two and two together. I don't need to know every detail. Just give me like the gist and the outcome and I can just run with it. And I'd say that's a superpower.
That is a superpower. That's really good. Because if not, you get locked into, what did they say, like analysis paralysis, right? It's like, well, I don't have to have every answer, but we do have to take some action here. So no, it is a superpower. What's the biggest lesson that you learned over your career thus far?
My biggest lesson is whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So I think it was him that said that, but don't quote me on that, on who said it, but someone said that of importance. That's the biggest lesson I've learned. So you have to believe in yourself.
Well, that definitely comes back to the mindset piece, right? It's like, got good stuff in, you will get good stuff out. So if you got to constantly be feeding yourself like, hey, I can do it. That's for sure. Well, for the busy working professional, somebody who's trying to work towards financial freedom, maybe it's somebody that was working in the hospital or, coming from another industry, like what advice would you have for them?
That if you want to make this shift, don't do it alone. You want to really listen to the people who are successful and actually are in a place where you want to be and not the people that aren't in that position where you want to be. It's really easy when you don't know. You're looking for someone that has the answers, and what ends up happening is you're asking the wrong person because you just don't know any better. You believe them and then you don't get anywhere. And so it's really when you start to seek the people, the examples that are where you want to be is when that light bulb and that sense of like fire starts to go, because now you have an example of what could happen and you start to say, okay, well, if they can do it, why can't I? That's what you should be doing if you're trying to make a leap like this.
Yeah, no, then you definitely want to avoid kind of the crabs in a bucket kind of thing, right? Like if you've heard that before, where some people just genuinely don't want to see other people succeed. I've had people refer to us just because I'm a real estate investor. Oh, you're a slumlord. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Just because it's not something that you want to do for whatever reason. So yeah, you definitely have to work to surround yourself with people who are going the same direction. No doubt. Well, if our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to hit you up to, hey, Stephanie, I want you to help me find a place, or I could use some coaching, or I could use some property management. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I'm pretty active on social. So Facebook, Instagram, probably Instagram is the best one. You can, or LinkedIn, even my YouTube channel as well. My tag is just my name. So at Stephanie Figueros, you can pretty much look that up and you'll find me on Instagram.
Okay, right on. And then if they want to know more about the conference, if they want to, tickets or whatever, what's the site for that? Where you direct people for that? Can they find that on your social also?
Yep, it's on my link tree in my bio, but the website directly is strnation.com.
Awesome. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on with me today and kind of sharing with our listeners your journey. Excited to check back in with you. I'm sure we'll check back in a year or 6 months or whatever. You maybe double portfolio and take on a ton more clients and whatever else. So I really appreciate you coming on the show with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for having me. I love having conversations like this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right. Have a great one. Thank you. Aloha. Great episode with Stephanie Figueros. It's funny because we share a similar Spanish surname with Figueros, but we kind of had a chuckle about that off camera. But yeah, no, great having her on. And definitely there's a lot of people in that boat that are trying to make a transition, trying to make a shift, let's say from a W-2 position. And for somebody like her is coming out of the medical field, that's a great job. Most people wouldn't walk away from a position like that because it's stable, it's healthcare. But I've had this conversation many times with people who have made that jump. So what an amazing opportunity where, hey, my worst case scenario is I just go get a job again at the hospital. So that's a great position to be in. But she obviously made a big shift going headlong into short-term rentals, offering management services, offering sales, coaching, mentoring, that kind of deal as well. And they've gone on to now and they had their second year of their conference. So make sure that you check them out. So definitely glad to have her on. All right, guys. Well, if you found value in this podcast, of course, make sure that you're leaving a review. We'd love your subscription so that you can stay on top of every new episode that comes out. Definitely go check out our website, tricityequity.com, to learn more about what we were doing on the multifamily side. If you want to connect with us locally, we do have monthly meetups as well. So speaking on Stephanie's call to, hey, surround yourself with people who are doing it. You can do that at our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and more, to learn more about the upcoming meetups. And then, of course, please share the podcast. If you guys are finding value in it, we'd love it if you share. We'd love to kind of get the message out to more people, empower more people to go out and take action and make a change in their lives. All right, guys, well, that's going to be it for today. We will look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Go out, take some action, and we will see you next time. Aloha.